Today's aim is that Kipsters will be able to solve simple interest problems. So make sure that you get the word simple interest in there, because there are multiple ways that you can calculate interest. Today we're talking about the simple interest, which is probably the easier way. 25% of what we do today will be review for you, and 75% of it will be new. You need to make sure that you're paying really careful attention. This is something that I used to do in 2 days that I've combined into one. I used to do the 25% of material that was review and make it take an entire day. And I found that this was just really slow and kind of unnecessary, because you guys are awesome. Now, that being said, we've got a lot to do today, and so we need to make sure that we are working as efficiently as possible. We're going to be talking about simple interest. The interest equation, before we get to really talking about what the different parts are and what they mean, is P times R times T equals I, where P is the principal. We're going to talk about what that means here in a second. R is the interest rate. And T is the time. Now, one thing that you should know about time is in all the problems that we're going to do, we're always talking about the annual interest rate, which means time is always going to be in years. I stands for interest. And TA stands for total amount. Okay. So when we're talking about interest, I'm going to start with talking about the principal. And the principal is an amount of money that is borrowed, loaned, charged on a credit card, or invested. So principal, we're going to write our definition here, is an amount that is loaned, comma, borrowed, charged on a credit card, or invested, or invested. Okay? So what happens every time that you loan someone money, or you let somebody borrow money, or you borrow money, or you charge money on a credit card, that's a service. You're saying, hey, can I borrow your money for a little bit? Shh. So that's a service. And so just like if you went in and you said, hey, could you please cut my hair, you would pay for that service. Okay? So just like that, when you borrow money, you are going to pay for that service. And the way that that is paid for is it depends on, they have this equation that determines how much interest you're going to pay. And interest is an extra amount of money you pay back to pay for the service of borrowing money. Okay, so you pay back extra interest. So if Isaiah comes to me and he says, Mr. Boots, can I borrow 50 bucks? I say, sure, you can borrow 50 bucks, but depending on how long you hold that for, I'm going to make you pay an extra percentage times the amount of time extra. So as part of the service, Isaiah's going to have to pay me back the $50, the principal, plus whatever interest is accrued. So, this is super common in the world. Every time that you borrow money from the bank, that's usually called a loan. The bank is letting you borrow money. So depending on how much you borrow from them and how long you borrow it and how much the interest rate is that they give you will determine how much extra you have to pay them back when you pay them back. If you charge money on a credit card, you are borrowing money from the credit card company because you're not physically handing the cashier any money. You're saying, hey, credit card company, I want you to go ahead and toss these people some cash for me right now because I don't have it with me. You're borrowing money from the credit card company. So because you're borrowing money for the credit card company, that's a service. You're going to pay them however much was charged on the card plus some amount of interest for that service. Now here's the one that people don't understand. There's also good things about interest. If you let people borrow money, that means they're going to give you your money back plus interest. Now, this happens every time you put money in a bank. Okay, it's not like Gringotts Wizarding Bank in Harry Potter. It's not like, hey, I give the bank $10. They walk back. They go back to my vault that's got my name on it. They open the vault. They put my $10 bill in there. They shut the vault and they leave. Then when I come back later and say, hey, I need $10, they go back to my vault. They open my vault. They take my $10 bill. They take it out of the vault and they bring it back to me. That's not the way a bank works. Okay? The way a bank works is they collect your money and basically they put all of the money in one big pot and they obviously not really in one big pot, but they put all the money together and then they use that money, okay? They keep a ledger, they keep notes of how much of that money that's in that big pot belongs to you, but then they're using that money to make more money. So the way they're making more money is by loaning people money and saying, hey, you're going to have to pay some extra interest back, investing in companies, and companies have to pay extra back. So since you're letting the bank borrow your money to make them more money, you're doing a service for the bank. So as a result of that, when you put money in the bank, you earn interest. They pay you for that service. Okay? That's a positive thing. It's not a lot, but it's better than nothing, right? It's better than putting in a coffee can underneath your bed and having it just sit there. And you don't earn anything. And when your house gets broken into and somebody steals your coffee can full of your money, then you've got nothing. Okay? So the other thing is you can invest money directly into stocks for companies. Basically, that's you letting the company borrow your money and saying, hey, and you can earn some interest back on that as well. Okay? Questions about interest. There's good interest and there's bad interest. Troy.
So you're saying, like, if I give the bank $50, they're going to use that money to more money?
Yep. They're going to use that money and they're going to say, hey, we're going to take Troy's $50. We're going to take Genesis $50, we're going to take Nafisa's $50, and then somebody's going to come along, Michael is going to say, hey, I need to borrow $150. The bank's going to say, okay, Michael, you can borrow $150, but when you give it back, you've got to pay interest. So now when Michael pays them back $160, the bank's made $10. Some of that money, because you're earning interest, is going to go back to paying you. Some of it's going to go back to paying the bank employees, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Mr. Ross.
So basically what you're saying is, say like I had $100 and I put it in the bank.
Yep.
They and someone else wants to take out a loan and then they give them my $100.
Sure.
Won't that, when they have to pay it back, won't they take like a portion of that for themselves?
Yeah. Yeah, so basically Michael's $160 or pays $160. So that was 50, 50, 50. obviously we're all going to get back, whenever we come in, we're going to get our $50 plus maybe another dollar more of interest depending on how long we left that money with the bank. And the rest of the $7 or so, that goes to the bank. It goes to pay their employees, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or they reinvest it into other things. Yang.
Don't you have individual vaults in banks, and for those vaults, does the bank pay you or do you pay the bank?
So within banks, because they're such secure locations, some banks have lock boxes and things like that that they store inside their vault where you can put valuable things. For those things, you're not giving them the money because they can't use like a diamond necklace to go make more money. The diamond necklace has to sit in the box. So you pay the bank to have that box. Basically, you're paying the bank to have this protective box for you rather than you having that protective box in your house. Winter.
Can you take that money from the money that you keep in?
Yeah, so if we have to think kind of very big picture. If all of us have put $50 in the bank, that's probably like $1,000. And maybe Ms. Atkinson has come along and made a $100 loan, so that $100 is gone. But whenever we want, we should be able to come back and get our $50. Yes?
What happens when, bankrupt? What does that mean?
So bankruptcy, I'm waiting, is a process. It's kind of a governmental law thing, so I'm not going to get too deep into it. But basically, bankruptcy tends to happen when people have taken a lot of loans. In other words, they owe a lot of people money, and it's going to be pretty much impossible for them to ever get that money back and pay those people back. And so there's a process called bankruptcy, which allows that person to basically drop all of their debt. And usually that's not personal. Usually those are like businesses will go bankrupt. So they will owe people money. They won't be able to afford to pay it back. They'll liquidate. They'll get rid of everything that they possibly can, make as much money back, and then in exchange for their business not being able to run anymore, the bank basically takes on their debt and pays back the people they owe. So it's a really convoluted process, bankruptcy. That's a really interesting one. William.
What is about a guy paying people money, like, oh, give this guy money, what is the guy that made the loan and then paid back, and then what happens to people that got it? And they have to pay it back or something?
Okay, ask your question one more time so I'm clear on the conversation or the question.
So, I know you're saying about how a guy makes a loan and then gives it to other people, the money.
Sure.
And then, what if the guy that made the loan can't pay? And then what happens to the people that got the money?
So let me see if I can clarify here. I give money to the bank. The bank loans it out to some guy, and that guy never pays it back. So this is kind of similar to bankruptcy. Banks, when they loan money, they determine how risky that loan is, depending on the person's history of accepting loans, based on what that person is going to use that money for, based on how much that money is, and basically how likely it is that that person's going to be able to pay that money back. If it's too risky, the bank won't even loan the money at all. If it's higher risk, they ask for a higher interest rate. And so sometimes the bank loses this game because they bet on something that's too risky and that person doesn't pay back. But you have to keep in mind that it's an entire huge bank with hundreds and hundreds of people putting money in that bank. And if the bank's making money and money and money off of all these other things, sometimes when they lose some, if I get my $10 back from Michael and I get $10 back from a whole bunch of other people who have loans, But Nafisa isn't able to pay back like a $20 loan. That's going to be okay because I made $10 from all these other people. It's kind of like looking at a big picture. So, yeah, Mr. Posey.
So, my question is like, what if somebody take out a loan, like a college loan or something, or a car loan, and for like $16,000, and like 16 people put $1,000 in each, and like they trying to go do something for like it's Black Friday, they need their money to go shopping or something. They come back, the person that took out the loan ain't got the money to give it to. The bank ain't got the money to give it to them because the person took out the loan.
Yeah. So this is kind of getting at an interesting question, and obviously Isaiah's kind of asking on a very small perspective, like the bank has 16 people who have $1,000 in the bank. There's no bank that only has $16,000 in it. No, let me... Okay, so obviously the bank is much bigger than that, okay? So there's a lot more people, but I mean, it kind of goes to the question, I think what Mr. Posey is basically asking is, if everybody who had money at the bank showed up in one day and said, I want to withdraw every dollar that I have in this bank, the bank would not have enough money to give them all. They would not have enough cash to be like, here's your cash, here's your cash, here's your cash. They would run out of money because that money is invested in other things. Loans to other people, invested in other companies, things like that. Okay? But federally, they are required to have a certain percentage of the money available in cash to give out to people. Now, if everybody showed up on one day to try and get their money back, that would be a problem. But obviously, that doesn't generally happen. One last question from Andrea, and then Nafisa, and then we're moving on.
So you're saying if you were to go put money in the bank right now,
Yep.
I said that I wanted to take out all of the money in the bank as a loan, which is probably a lot. And so I'm using other people's money.
Yeah, basically.
So if someone takes a loan, they're going to use other people's money.
Basically. Who do I say had the last question? Nafisa.
Oh, okay. How come if it's all your? Because one time my mom, she ran out of gas and she needed to put like, because we were going far, so she had to put like the rest of her money that was on her card in, and then like the next day they called my mom and they said like there needs to be a certain amount of money all the time in the bank.
Mm-hmm.
So like I don't know, because one time I went with my dad to talk. Because he was talking about opening
No,
his
I've got you. I answered this question in one of the other classes. So Nafisa is saying that that the bank has told her family that they have to have a certain amount of money in their bank account, otherwise they're going to charge them. So kind of think about it this way. In some form or fashion, the bank is actually doing a service for you by holding and protecting your money. Okay? So theoretically, you kind of owe them.
But it's already...
So you kind of have to be able to pay for that service. And normally you don't pay for that service if you have a certain amount in your bank account, because if they have 1,000 of your dollars and they can make $20 a month off of your $1,000, then basically you're kind of paying them $20 to hold on to your money. Now, if you have like $5 in the bank, they can only make like 2 cents a month off your money, in which case you're no longer paying for your service anymore because you're paying 2 cents for service that other people are paying $20 for. So when you have a low amount of money in your bank, the bank can't make money off of your money. So they say, sorry, we're here babysitting your money. we're going to charge you for babysitting your money. Okay? All right, so let's look at this last definition. Okay, we spent a lot of time there, and I was very generous answering a lot of questions, but that means that we've got to blaze through the rest of what we have to do today. Okay, we can't just waste time now. All right, so interest rate, that's just the percentage of extra money that is returned. So the higher the interest rate, the more extra money that you're going to have to return. All right, so let's look at an example. Norman invests $300 into a savings account at 5% simple interest. After 3 years, what is the total amount of money in the account, including the interest? So, this type of money is a simple interest problem. Again, focus on that you do need to write simple interest because there are different ways of calculating interest that we will talk about later that are not as simple. As I read through this question, it asks me what the total amount of money is in the account. So the bank is constantly adding that interest into my bank account, so I want to know what the total amount is that's in there. And now I'm starting to look through some of my values. So I invest $300. So remember that principal is always the amount that is invested, borrowed, loaned, any of those verbs. It says that there is 5% simple interest. So remember our percentage of interest earned is always our interest rate. So that's going to be 0.05 for 5%. And 3 years, that's definitely how long the money is invested for. Remember that time always has to be in years. And so now we've got an equation. P times R times T equals I. We're always going to write that equation. 300 times 0.05 times 3 is equal to I. So this one's pretty easy. I'm going to multiply my 300 times my 0.05. Two times. That's going to give me 15, but I've still got this times 3. 15 times 3 is 45.
You have to label it like that on the test.
Mm-hmm. And so this tells me the amount of interest is 45. Now, does that mean that Norman is only getting $45 back?
That's my neighbor's name.
No, that means Norman is getting his regular $300 back that he put in there, plus the $45. So the total amount in there is it's $300, plus the bank is going to add $45 into his bank account of interest. So the total amount of money is $345. Had it asked how much interest did he earn, we would have stopped at 45. But this one asks how much is left in his account. Questions? Isaiah?
So, like, you know how old people retire? And, like, do they get their money from their simple rate? I mean, from their simple interest? Like, how, like, you got to retire and, like, how they don't have to pay their bills daily?
So, interesting question about retirement. Basically, old people have been saving money for a long, long time. And while it's been saving, it's obviously been gaining interest along the way. So when they retire, they have all of the money they saved plus the interest to live on. And then while that money is still in the bank and they haven't taken it all out, it's still earning interest. So ideally, what would happen is you would save so much money that you would just live on the interest. You would be earning so much interest every year that you could just live on that amount, and your amount that's in the bank would always stay the same. Ideally. That doesn't usually happen.
So then the grandkids
Right.
have a lot of money.
Yes, after investing $150 in the bank account for 6 months, Alexis makes $3 in simple interest. What is the interest rate? So this one clearly asks us, what is the interest rate? Now this is still simple interest. It clearly states that it's simple interest. Now, if it ever asks you a question, if I ever ask you a question about interest, and I don't state that it is simple interest, you assume that it is simple interest. So unless I tell you otherwise, always assume simple interest. So this says what is the interest rate? The interest rate is blank percent, because we're looking for the interest rate this time. That means I'm solving here. Which means I need to figure out what information is given to me. So after investing $150, okay, investing $150, that means that's the principal, because the principal is always the amount that is invested, borrowed, loaned, or charged on a credit card. It says it's in the bank account for 6 months. That's my time. But what did I say was true about time? Oscar.
There's not a lot.
Always has to be in years. So we need to have some quick conversions. These are the ones you have to memorize.
We gotta memorize stuff.
Or no. 3 months is equal to 0.25 years.
No, it's not. It's 3 months.
6 months
Yes.
is equal to 0.5 years.
How do we know?
And 9 months
7.5.
is equal to 0.75 years.
I'll tell you.
So, when I plug in my time on this particular problem, so when I put in my time here, I want to put in 6 months, but I need that in terms of years, so I'm going to put in my time is 0.5. Because that's how many years 6 months is. And as I look through, it tells me that there is $3 in interest. Okay, where's that piece of information going to go? Genesis.
$3.
Where?
And the interest.
Yeah, for the interest. All right. So in this case, we're not given the total amount, but I don't need the total amount because I have the equation over here. 150 times R, my interest rate, times 0.5 is equal to 3. Now all I have to do is solve the equation. So, one thing that really irritates me is during alone time or during together time, somebody's going to come up to me and they say, hey, Mr. Boots, am I supposed to multiply in this problem or am I supposed to divide in this problem? Shh. And what I'm going to tell them, this isn't before they set up the equation, what I'm going to tell them is set up your equation and solve the equation. That's the rule. That's the rule for this unit is know the equation that you need to use, plug the information that you know into the equation, and solve the equation. That way, all you have to do is know 2 equations for this entire unit. 1, original amount times percentage change equals change. And 2, principal times rate times time equals interest. You know those 2 equations, that's the entire unit. Okay? So now we just need to solve this equation. I'm going to solve this equation. I'm just going to quickly rearrange this using the commutative property so I can multiply my 150 times my 0.5. So I can simplify this equation a little bit. 150 times 0.5.
Yep.
It's going to give me 75. So I've got 75 times R is equal to 3. Divide both sides by 75 to solve the equation. And here, 3 divided by 75. 75 goes into 30 0 times. 75 goes into 300 4 times, and that's 300. So R is equal to 0.04. And since I want that as a percentage for my interest rate, move the decimal 1 2 times. That's 4%. The interest rate is 4%.
Oops, let's do this next one so we can have more time.
Okay, Kevin. I don't have time for hypotheticals. If you have a question about this problem, we can answer that. Okay. All right. A college student pays $48 in simple interest on a $300 loan at an interest rate of 2%. How much or how long was the time period?
Multiply that.
So again, this is a simple interest.
You multiply, then you multiply by 2.
And it's asking me how long was the time period? How long? Oh, sorry. So my answer sentence should be, copy the question. The time period is blank. What are the units of time always? Years. So when I solve for time, it's going to be in years. All right, so I need to find the information in this problem. It says a college student pays $48 in simple interest. $48 is what? Which piece of information? Thank you for raising your hand. Jacqueline. Yeah, the interest. It says in interest. So $48 is the interest. On a $300 loan, $300 is what?
The loan.
Mr. Posey. Principal. That's how much is loaned, borrowed, or charged. At an interest rate of 2%. Well, our percentage is always going to be our interest rate. So now we know that we're solving for time. So we're going to set up our equation, 300 times 0.02 times time is equal to 48. Now all I need to do is solve the equation. I'm going to simplify this first. 300 times 0.02.
Yes, that's what we need to do.
That's going to give me 6 times t is equal to 48. Now I just need to solve the equation. The inverse operation, divide by 6. T is equal to 8. So that money was left in the bank for, or was borrowed from the bank for 8 years. Okay? Questions about that problem?
That's not a lot of money to leave it in for 8 years.
Key points. Oscar.
The equation's different from the last, like, from the last part and the end.
No.
Like, there's only 2 equations.
Okay, so he's saying one of the key points here is definitely the equation. P times R times T equals I is definitely a key point, but how we use that is going to be the second part of this key point. Ellen. So she's got our second key point, which I'm going to put over here by the information we already wrote about this key point. Time is always in years. So if you need to convert, those are your conversions. So going along with this equation over here, what's the information that we use this? How do we use this equation to solve these problems? What What is the discussion I had about how we solve these problems? What is the discussion I had about how we solve these problems? In fact, I said it this entire unit. We all solve all the problems the same way. Oscar. Yeah, plug in the information given.
I can try the answer.
And solve for the unknown.